Hello, I'm Brian Glow. This is number 0842, the Stuff Files program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0842. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet David Barron, who is the author of The Martians, the true story of an alien craze that captured turn-of-the-century America.
1907, the Wall Street Journal, not exactly a tabloid newspaper, said the biggest discovery of 1907 was the proof of intelligent life on Mars. It hoodwinked the public. In some ways, this is a cautionary tale, right? We have to be careful that ideas sometimes can take hold and spread that are wrong, and we have to be careful not to blind ourselves into believing things that are true, things that are false because we want them to be true.
Nigel Williams is the author of a series of books called The Adventures of Alfie, age 13. It features an early teen boy who has amazing adventures, all the while mourning the mother that he lost.
Young people carry so much on their shoulders, and it might be, silly things to us like the death of a rabbit or whatever, but sometimes it's deeper than that. And I think with the advent of social media and what that brings in terms of people scrutinizing you, young people sort of carry so much in them and on them that I wanted to create a character that reflected a modern teenager and what they're carrying, and I wanted that to feel real. I didn't want it to weigh him down within the adventure, but I wanted it to be ever-present.
Stuart Nulman is in with another edition of Book Banter.
Hi, I'm Stuart Nulman, and Book Banter is on the case with Swedish detective Juno Linna as he tries to solve a series of gruesome axe murders in Lars Kepler's latest crime thriller, The Sleepwalker. We open this literal cold case soon on the Stuff File program.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, morning shower thought, and of course, an idiot of the day. The guests later, the person who told you this was show number 0842 was Brian Glow, an international illusionist, a comedy magician, and also an anti-bullying and suicide awareness advocate who spreads the anti-bullying messages to youths. He was a guest back on show number 0837, so you can hear his words of wisdom on that show. Thank you very much, Brian, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. In California, Bay Area police officers stopped an empty Waymo robotaxi for making an illegal U-turn during a weekend DUI enforcement operation.
This is where we're going.
The driverless vehicle performed the violation directly in front of officers at a traffic light, said the department on their social media. That's right. No driver, no hands, no clue.
Introducing the self-driving service, Waymo One.
Officers could not issue a citation because their citation books don't have a box for robot. Police contacted Waymo, a subsidiary of Google's parent company Alphabet. A Waymo spokesperson said that the autonomous driving system is designed to respect the rules of the road and added, "We are looking into this situation and are committed to improving road safety through our ongoing learning and experience." Police said legislation is being developed to allow officers to issue notices to driverless car companies. It's tough when officers stick their head in from the driver's side window and there's nobody there to answer their questions, just crickets.
License and registration. You know how fast you were going?
Yeah, that must be frustrating. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has announced its plans to ban the use of orange bee, a synthetic food color for sausage casings and hot dogs. The last time any manufacturer wanted to use orange bee was in 1978. No one has even made it since then. Then why ban it? Well, said Sarah Schorzer of the Center for Science in the Public Interest, it says they are currently willing to take mandatory steps only where it has no impact. Okay. The only company, by the way, that made Orange Bee was the William J. Stange Company, and that no longer even exists. Well, I guess bureaucrats got a bureaucrat. Two 19-year-olds, Brian Travis Reynolds and Anthony Constante, were arrested following a gunfight incident that began over a Netflix account. The September 23rd confrontation in San Antonio started when Reynolds changed 20-year-old Vincent Munoz's Netflix account name to an insult. Munoz agreed to fight the pair after feeling disrespected. When Reynolds and Constante arrived at his home, they jumped a fence to reach Munoz. Reynolds carried a handgun in his waistband, which he passed to Constante during the altercation. Video shows Constante repeatedly striking Munoz while holding the weapon. The gun was returned to Reynolds as fighting continued. A shot fired during the struggle, which left Munoz bleeding from his head, though officials remain uncertain whether a bullet struck him. Both suspects were taken into custody. Well, I guess that's the antithesis of the term Netflix and chill. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, under the heading of What is the World Coming to?, 18-year-old Eric Zhu secured $10 million in investments for his 9-month-old startup, Sperm Racing, now valued at $75 million. The company hosts competitive events where men's sperm samples race on microscopic tracks while crowds watched enhanced video feeds. Zhu's first Los Angeles event was back in April, and that cost $1.5 million to produce and generated 450 million video views. James Perillo from Figment Capital called it the perfect blend of entertainment and health. Meanwhile, Eric Zhu said back in April at that first event,
I want to build the Olympics for sperm. The general public doesn't talk about it because it's so taboo. It's always been associated with adult entertainment or something that's degenerate. What we want to do is we want to make it more of like a sport or a different type of entertainment, but more of like optimizing biomarkers.
The startup faced criticism when reports revealed early races were pre-recorded with predetermined winners. Zhu acknowledged the initial crude system, but says the company now uses real-time feeds with enhanced graphics. He plans to expand nationally through college partnerships with Total Frat Move and develop sperm-themed merchandise, including sperm worms vitamin supplements. Wow. 450 million video views plus a live audience. Talk about a race that reaches a climax. Anyway, let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Back at the turn of the 20th century, long before NASA began contemplating a visit to our neighboring world, a turn-of-the-century Mars craze invaded the public's imagination. Award-winning science journalist David Barron is the author of The Martians, the true story of an alien craze that captured turn-of-the-century America. And he joins us from Boulder, Colorado via Riverside.com. Hi, David.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being on the program with us. What was your initial idea when you put together this book, The Martians?
Well, so I'm a child of the 1960s, and when I was a kid, it often seemed that I was surrounded by Martians. I mean, on Saturday morning cartoons, there was Marvin the Martian with Bugs Bunny. There was a popular sitcom called My Favorite Martian. There were Martians in sci-fi novels and Martians in comic books. And I wondered as I grew up where all that came from. I'm now a writer, a science writer, and I wondered, what is it about Mars that has captured the public imagination? Well, what I discovered and what I write about in my book is that long before Martians were staples of science fiction, they were actually thought to be scientific fact. I mean, you could open the New York Times in 1906 and read in all seriousness about the supposed civilization on Mars and what the Martians were like and our attempts to communicate with them. So that's what I decided to write about, is this strange, forgotten episode in history when there was widespread belief that there was a civilization on the planet next door.
Do you find that there is any kind of correlation to the craze of Martians back in the day and some of the, I wouldn't say conspiracy theories, but some of the tall tales that are in the news today?
Absolutely. I mean, so look, I'm no expert on UFOs. I've never seen an alien spacecraft. I can't say what people have seen, but there's a lot of similarity in the excitement about supposed aliens visiting Earth that we hear these days. Now, I guess people call them UAPs, unexplained aerial phenomena, and the excitement about the Martians more than 100 years ago. I mean, so the period I write about in my book, I mean, you had not only the newspapers and the public, but I mean, prominent scientists like Alexander Graham Bell, who was writing in all seriousness about the supposed civilization on Mars. There was no civilization on Mars. But an idea can really take hold and spread among the public, often with the help of the sensational press, which happened back then. And when it's an idea that captures the public's imagination, that is something we want to believe in, people have a tendency to blind themselves. I'm not saying that's exactly what's going on with UFOs today, but we have to be careful that often what we see out there and what we believe is out there says more about what's in our minds than what really exists in outer space.
Do you think that nowadays, with more science technology that's out there, especially with satellites and probes and all the like, that there is still a belief that perhaps there could be alien life, but it's more rooted in science than in fiction?
Well, I mean, there's been a real change among astronomers, I would say, in the last 50 years. It was, not that long ago, it was kind of poo-pooed to be serious about looking for alien life. Now it's very much embraced. There's a whole scientific subdiscipline called astrobiology, which is all about looking for life in outer space. NASA just a few weeks ago had a press conference saying that they had found the most convincing evidence yet of past life on Mars. Not proof, but quite suggestive evidence that there may once have been microbes on Mars. So there's a lot of excitement about the search for extraterrestrial life. There are more than 6,000 planets have now been found around other stars. The James Webb Space Telescope and other new observatories are studying those planets, looking for possible signs of life. So it's become very much mainstream. Again, there's a difference between what the astronomers are doing and say what the excitement about supposed alien spacecraft visiting the Earth. But by all means, it's very much a serious discipline looking for alien life.
Well, you mentioned microbes, and I was going to bring that up. Do you think that one of the differences with our current push to find alien life is that it would be microbial, it wouldn't necessarily be alien creatures of sentient beings of that kind?
Well, obviously, we'd all be a lot more excited to find some intelligent civilization out there rather than slime mold or algae or something like that. I think within our own solar system, if there were a civilization on Mars for real or on Jupiter, we would know it. But the search for life on planets elsewhere in other solar systems definitely includes the possibility of intelligent life. And what I write about in my book, the Mars craze of 100 years ago, when it was because these were supposedly sentient beings that people got so excited. The inventor Nikola Tesla in 1899, a genius, an absolute genius, he picked up strange radio signals that he was convinced came from these Martians. And that just really set off the craze even more. You had people wanting to communicate with the Martians, to learn what the Martians know, because they were supposedly a more advanced civilization. And so people wanted the Martians to solve our problems. And I think that that's part of the wish of finding a more advanced civilization. Yes, there's a danger they might come and conquer us. But if there's a more advanced civilization out there, maybe they can answer some of our long-sought questions about, about life itself. That's what people wanted the Martians to teach us 100 years ago. And I think that says a lot about the excitement about alien life today as well.
I think one of the situations when it comes to supposed alien life is the fact that, and I'm using an analogy here, where we find lost tribes in the jungle someplace, and we don't want to uh, reach out to them because we don't want to uh, tarnish whatever civilization they have. Uh, could it be a similar situation if there were intelligent life out there of someone doing the same thing to us? In other words, using the Star Trek terminology of the Prime Directive.
Yeah, I mean, that is one theory. It's often thought that, how come we haven't found alien life yet? There are hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars. And likely, most of those stars have multiple planets around them. And you would think life should be abundant out there. And, so there are a bunch of theories. One is, well, maybe life is abundant, but intelligent life isn't. Maybe when life becomes intelligent, unfortunately, it develops some technology to destroy itself, and it doesn't last very long. But as you say, there is another theory that maybe there are intelligent civilizations out there that have intentionally kept quiet. They're kind of watching us as if we're creatures in a zoo, and they don't want to disturb us. They want to just watch us. Who knows? I mean, it's an interesting idea. It's certainly possible. But that's part of the excitement about just thinking about these ideas. Is the universe is so vast that we really don't know what's out there.
When you wrote the book, who were you writing it for? And to that, I'm asking basically, were you writing it for the person who is a skeptic who doesn't believe in aliens in any way, shape, or form, or someone who has some hope and some desire of finding aliens? Which one were you thinking about when you were writing the book, if any of them?
Well, I would say, I mean, really kind of both. So the book that I've written, it tells both a cautionary tale and an inspiring tale. So here you've got these prominent scientists back in the late 19th century seeing things on Mars. They were seeing these strange lines on Mars that they imagined were irrigation canals, of all things, that the Martians were using to survive on a planet that was running out of water. That's where this whole idea came from. They were seeing things on Mars that suggested the existence of an advanced civilization. But they took that idea a little too far, and it was wrong. And yet, in 1907, the Wall Street Journal, not exactly a tabloid newspaper, said the biggest discovery of 1907 was the proof of intelligent life on Mars. It hoodwinked the public. So in some ways, this is a cautionary tale, right? We have to be careful that ideas sometimes can take hold and spread that are wrong. And we have to be careful not to blind ourselves into believing things that are true, things that are false because we want them to be true. On the other hand, that crazy period I write about in my book had some very positive outcomes. It was the excitement about Mars and the Martians at the turn of the last century that inspired science fiction. You may have heard of the Hugo Awards. That's the big award in science fiction. It's named after a guy named Hugo Gernsback, who has been called the father of science fiction. He was an early writer and editor of science fiction. He had a number of magazines. Well, Hugo Gernsback, among others, said he got excited about the idea of life in outer space because he grew up in that era reading books about the supposed real Martians. And other folks, Edgar Rice Burroughs, who wrote the Tarzan novels, wrote a bunch of books about life on Mars starting in the 19-teens that inspired a whole generation, not only of additional science fiction writers, but folks like Carl Sagan, who says he decided to become a planetary scientist and to find out what was on Mars because he grew up on the science fiction that was steeped in that era when people believed in life on Mars. So the belief in alien life, the excitement about alien life is a great thing. It can inspire us to go find out what's out there. But we have to also keep in check our imagination. And if the evidence comes in suggesting that what we thought was a UFO or what we thought were canals on Mars is not true, well, maybe that's not true. But it doesn't mean the aliens aren't out there and we shouldn't keep looking.
Do you find that scientists today are more into find and verify than some of the scientists in the past, which were simply find and speculate? And when did that change?
I don't know that there's really been a change. I mean, scientists are human beings. The thing about science is it's intended to be objective. And hopefully we've constructed an edifice of science that in the end is self-correcting. But individuals, they could be great scientists, they could have Nobel Prizes, but their brains are constructed just like all of ours into, perceiving things sometimes that aren't true or getting so wedded to a hypothesis that they're going to prove it no matter what, even as the evidence comes in against it. I think scientists have always believed themselves to be objective and above the foibles of the rest of us, but they're not. Again, science as an edifice, I think, really does move us forward. Individual scientists are human beings, and that's always been true.
David, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us and talk about your book, The Martians.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
David Barron, author of The Martians, the true story of an alien craze that captured turn-of-the-century America. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0842, and you'll find the link to David's website, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
It's raining cats and dogs outside. So be careful not to step in a poodle.
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestuffileprogram.
I'm standing Nova Scotia proud for Canada. This is Anne Murray. Early in my career, I received a lot of pressure to move to the U.S., but I just couldn't do it. Canada was my safe haven, my light at the end of the tunnel, and it still is. Buy Canadian. Shop as if your country depends upon it. Keep your money in Canada for Canada.
You're listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, coming to you from Montreal, Canada, where we share the longest unprotected border in the world with the United States. Take that as a sign of extreme friendship or a warning.
And still to come in the program, we'll talk to Nigel Williams, the author of the book series The Adventures of Alfie, age 13, plus Stuart Nulman is along with another edition of Book Banter. We also have a morning shower thought and, of course, an idiot of the day, and much more in Stuff File News right here, right now. A speeding pickup truck in a residential neighborhood in Brewster, New York, hit a curb which tore off a wheel and caused a rollover at around 9 a.m. The driver was going so fast that the pickup ended up on its wheels 600 feet from where it struck the curb. First responders put out an urgent call for medical help. The driver, 41-year-old Angel Vasquez, and his 16-year-old son Dennis were partially ejected through windows. 44-year-old Saul Lopez Vasquez was fully ejected and lying on the road. All three were hospitalized in serious condition. Vasquez was cited for speeding, driving without a license, because they never seem to have a valid license in these stories, and operating an unregistered motor vehicle. Ditto. Why was he in such a hurry? They were late for church. Wow. If he had gone a bit faster, he and his son might have been personally introduced to God. 57-year-old Gail Marie Stevenson was arrested in Key West after threatening residents with a revolver while searching for her allegedly stolen phone, which police found in her SUV. Officers responded following reports of an armed woman in a white Ford Explorer. Stevenson told police she had given a younger gentleman a ride home from the American Legion Hall and believed he stole her phone. When officers asked her to check her vehicle, they discovered the phone on the driver's side floorboard. Multiple neighbors reported Stevenson banging on people's homes and threatening those residents, stating she had been robbed. One 52-year-old man said she pointed a revolver at his chest. Police recovered the loaded weapon in a purple Crown Royal bag behind a trash can. Stevenson initially denied having the weapon, claiming her husband had it with him in Georgia. Here's the part that everyone in the audience is now guessing at. Officers reported she smells strongly of alcohol and admitted to having several drinks earlier that night. Quelle surprise. Stevenson faces aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, armed trespassing, and evidence tampering charges. Well, in jail, she gets one phone call. I hope they offer her some sort of telephonic device because she seems to be having a problem hanging on to hers. Okay, I don't usually start off by saying the headline of a story, but this one really says everything. 13-year-old crashes stolen police vehicle while drunk. That's a bingo card. A 13-year-old driver and an 11-year-old passenger survived a high-speed crash near Flagstaff after stealing a Chevy Silverado from the Flagstaff Police Department at around 1 a.m. And seriously, what is a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old doing out at a police station at 1 a.m.? Anyway, the vehicle traveled on Interstate 40, crossed into oncoming traffic, and exceeded 100 miles per hour before the child lost control. The car struck a guardrail, rolled multiple times, and hit a tree with such force that the steering wheel separated and landed 50 feet away. Both children sustained non-life-threatening injuries and were hospitalized. The 13-year-old's blood alcohol level was measured at 0.183, which was more than double Arizona's adult legal limit. The teenager faces DUI charges, said the police department in a statement. We're thankful the kids are okay, but this could have ended way worse. Juvenile joyriding and underage drinking are extremely dangerous. Talk to your kids about the dangers of drinking and unlicensed driving. Yeah. You know, if I did 1/3 of what this kid did at 13 at 1 a.m., my parents would be up on charges for my murder. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, Brina Hayes faces criminal mischief charges after causing over $1,000 in damage to a Louisville Little Caesars restaurant over a $1 sauce fee. Apparently, she likes to dip.
Like to dip things?
Try Little Caesar's Crazy Dipper Deal. 2 pepperoni pizzas for $7.99 and 16 Crazy Bread Dippers and 2 sauces free.
Pizza, pizza.
Louisville police only arrested Haynes last week for the January incident. Authorities say Haynes placed a phone order and requested extra sauce when picking up her food. When staff informed her of the $1 charge, police say Haynes became angry and destructive.
Bring $6.49 in unmarked bills or marked bills or coins or just a credit or debit card to Little Caesars. Come alone and bring your friends or family. Bring everyone.
Surveillance footage reportedly captured Haynes knocking items from the counter, including the computer register. Police have not released additional details about what led to the delayed arrest or whether Haynes has entered a plea to the criminal mischief charge. I wonder if they have dipping sauce in jail.
Like the dip things?
Pizza, pizza.
And let's get to our next guest here on this edition of the Stuff All program, shall we? Nigel Williams is the author of the series of books called The Adventures of Alfie, Age 13. They are 3 middle-grade paranormal adventure books on Bigfoot, aliens, and vampires. They are titled Alfie and the Bigfoot of Bluff Creek, Alfie and the Aliens of Area 51, and Alfie and the Vampires of Transylvania. Nigel joins us from Los Angeles via Riverside.com. Hi, Nigel.
Hey, how are you? Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Thank you very much for being here on the program. So, first of all, when did you decide that you were writing books for basically middle schoolers?
Right. In a previous life, I was a theatre director and a theatre teacher. I retired from that 3 years ago, and my eldest daughter, who is a literacy consultant for schools in the UK, said, "Hey, Dad, we're finding it hard to get boys to read, especially in that 9 to 13 age bracket. Why don't you think about using your time and your creative energy now to write some stories and engage young people like you did in the theatre classroom?" And I said, "Okay, but what are they interested in?" And she said, "Well, they're English kids, but they love all things American. They love conspiracy theories. They love creatures, monsters." And that was a great prompt for me because since I came to the States, which was 15 years ago, I've been pretty obsessed with all those TV programs like Expedition Bigfoot, Finding Bigfoot, Ancient Aliens. That's sort of been my evening diet of TV watching. So I thought, hey, if I can combine that obsession with writing and trying to engage young people, that would be a really great mission or a challenge for me.
You said this became an obsession for you. When did this obsession start? Only when you came to the United States?
Well, I guess the obsession was realized then because of the access to TV programs and so many TV programs. But actually, I do remember in the late 60s, my dad calling me into the living room to watch the news on a black and white TV. And it was the Patterson-Gimlin movie, the super famous film of Patty, the Bigfoot walking across Bluff Creek. And I guess as kids, we are sort of obsessed with things that go bump in the dark, what's under the bed, the possibility of monsters. So I think that's always been lingering there and then suppressed probably as I grew up. But now I've sort of like opened that Pandora's box of obsessions again.
Now, when it comes to Bigfoot, when it comes to aliens at Area 51, that is, for lack of a better term, geographically very American. Vampires, they come from Transylvania, but you come from the UK. What about the Loch Ness Monster?
I know you were going to say that. I actually used to live 30 minutes from Loch Ness, and it is an incredible body of water. But there's something more global about those other things that has been super interesting. Like, as I began to research Bigfoot, and my first book is about Bigfoot, and specifically Bigfoot in California, but I spent a lot of time researching and listening to people, interviewing people, and listening to podcasts like Bigfoot and Beyond, Sasquatch Chronicles, and talking to the people that make those programs. And Bigfoot is a global phenomenon. It's not a localized or a parochial a monster or a cryptid. Yes, it exists in California. Yes, the modern obsession with it started in the 50s in California, but it's all over the world. China has the Yeren, Australia has the Yowie, Nepal has Yeti, Russia has the Almas, and they're all bipedal, ape-like cryptid creatures. So, as a phenomena, it actually exists around the world. But Alfie, my hero, my 13-year-old protagonist in the first book, in all the books, but in the first book, discovers that as he comes from the UK to live in Los Angeles after the death of his mum, living with his dad and his sister. His dad works in films, that's what brought him to LA. He quickly discovers that Bigfoot is not only a Northern California phenomenon, but there are Bigfoot stories in the Santa Ana Mountains, even in Los Angeles. In the book, Alfie investigates the sighting in Buena Park, where Knott's Berry is, which is a big sort of fun fair area. So it's pretty pervasive as a phenomenon. I found out more and more as I researched. And then aliens again. Alfie's first adventures in California, his second adventures following aliens to New Mexico, obviously Roswell, Area 51, Skinwalker Ranch, which is a big TV program and a government base that is investigating alien phenomena. So that again is quite localized, and I sort of did the road trips myself, so it felt real in the writing. And then vampires, of the 3 books that I've written, they're the more mythological monster, and it was hard to find facts other than Vlad the Impaler from Romania, Transylvania, who by staking his enemies began the sort of the phenomena of vampires as we know them. But I took Alfie back to London for that story because I quite like marrying it with a sense of Victorian Gothic, and it's a sort of it's almost a Sherlock Holmes. It's Alfie becomes Sherlock Holmes as he follows these vampires around England. My obsession, I guess, is rooted in lovely American TV programs like Kolchak. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, absolutely.
From the 70s and 80s. Yeah, I mean, that was one of my favourite ever TV programs. I've been rewatching it again. And there seems to be an interest, in things like Supernatural. That was another one of my favourite TV programs. And then, and Scooby-Doo, which other end of the scale. But somebody asked me the other day, what are the adventures like? Well, they're very cinematic, they're very fast-paced, but they're sort of like Enola Holmes, that new film franchise, which is the younger sister of Sherlock Holmes, meets Scooby-Doo, meets sort of Stranger Things. I've sort of like tried to tap into that as well, in terms of hitting the right zeitgeist.
I got to admit that when I first read of your books, I thought, this has a Scooby-Doo feel to it.
I take that as a compliment. I love Scooby-Doo. And the thing about middle grade writing is there has to be peril and there has to be danger. But, it has to be peril without gratuitousness, and it has to be danger sort of without consequences. So that follows that Scooby-Doo model. Yes, you want to feel engaged and you want to feel that your protagonist and his sidekicks are in danger and things could happen to them. But you also, as a middle grade reader, you want to be safe within that world as well. So writing pseudo horror or paranormal or supernatural stories, you want them to feel safe within that world. You want them to be able to feel that they can have that adventure, but they're going to be okay. And I think that is a little bit like Scooby-Doo. It has comic qualities as well. Obviously, I'm trying to write with humour and wit, but I'm also trying to tackle serious things within it as well. As a teacher, I sort of realised that young people don't want to be patronised. They are taking on real issues. In fact, Alfie is dealing with the death of his mum in his adventures, and we discover why she died and how she died later in book 2 and book 3. But in book 1, he's just dealing with that grief. But it isn't a story laid down with grief. Alfie doesn't even know how to describe it because he doesn't use the word grief. And it sits underneath sort of the roller coaster adventure. So I'm trying to sort of take on real issues, but I'm trying to wrap it up in a fast-paced roller coaster, sort of cinematic story.
You actually came from the UK to America, but you came as an adult, correct?
Yes. So I came like 15 years ago, and I was brought over to direct and teach theatre at a college school in Los Angeles.
Your character, Alfie, who is only 13, he also makes that travel. So is there something in the way that you've written him that is kind of reminiscent of your journey, even though you were an adult and he is a child?
Yes, totally. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important as writers that we write with a sort of authentic voice. And going through the process of trying to write this story, I was told, well, use your authentic voice. You're an English person coming to America, but try and imagine that within the shoes of a 13-year-old. So Alfie has never been to America before, so all his insights, his observations, his learnings about what happens in Los Angeles are done sort of for the first time. And I've been able to use my own experience, dealing with talking about time, a distance rather, in time rather than miles, describing roads by their numbers, dealing with fast food, a beach life, taking on the culture and the climate, even the way schools operate and the language of teachers here and the vocabulary of the description of the school is all something I've learned over the last 15 years, and I've tried to make that fresh in the eyes of Alfie. So I think you hit a really good point that we have to use authentic voices. Alfie's sidekicks are Milos, who's an American boy whose heritage is Romanian. That's how we get to the vampires. And Tally, who's a girl who doesn't know her dad, but she thinks he's Native American. And I wanted to write point of view stories for those characters, but in the end I had to draw it back because that's not my authentic voice. So the world in the story is viewed completely through the eyes of Alfie, the English boy. It's his story, his feelings, but the others are support characters within that story.
You mentioned that Alfie, his mother has died, and you mentioned the grief he goes through in the first book. You delve into it more in the second and third book. Was that something that you always planned to do when you first started writing the first book?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I did in my mind, I wanted to build a world or a universe. I didn't want to just write a book. I wanted to map out who Alfie was and what had happened to him, and also give depth and detail to the characters around him. So each book is a book in itself, but it's like Shrek would say, it's an onion. You peel back layers each book, and you find out more as you go in. Yeah, the first book is really about Alfie transitioning to America with the loss of his mum. And she's with him in the first book. She talks to him, he hears her voice, and he's dealing with this black cloud around him, this sort of blanket that's on him, and he doesn't understand why. And it's basically the guilt that he's feeling, that he thinks he's associated with his mum's death and just losing her, but he can't articulate it. And I saw that a lot as I was teaching. Young people carry so much on their shoulders. And it might be, silly things to us like the death of a rabbit or whatever, but sometimes it's deeper than that. And I think with the advent of social media and what that brings in terms of people scrutinizing you, young people sort of carry so much in them and on them that I wanted to create a character that reflected a modern teenager and what they're carrying, and I wanted that to feel real. I didn't want it to weigh him down within the adventure, but I wanted it to be ever present. And then book 2 and book 3 sort of like opens it up a little bit when we discover more about why and what happened.
Congratulations on the 3 books so far. And I say so far, are you planning more?
Well, I've just returned from the coffee shop where I was structuring book 4, which is Werewolves in New York. I like to write about places that I've been. I really like to give the places a real feel. So yeah, book 4 is about the mythology of werewolves and encountering that. And I have got ideas for books 5 and 6. I'm looking at a haunting book based on an island in Mexico City called the Island of Haunted Dolls. And then I've got a 6th book about pirate treasure. I used to love that program, Curse of Oak Island. I don't know if you ever used to watch that or are still watching it. So I love the idea. And as a child, I loved the idea of cursed treasure and pirate treasure. So book 6, if it happens, would be about the Captain Kidd's cursed pirate treasure. That's what I've got in my head.
Well, congratulations with the 3 books. Again, it's Alfie and the Bigfoot of Bluff Creek, Alfie and the Aliens of Area 51, and Alfie and the Vampires of Transylvania. Thank you very much, Nigel, for taking the time to be on the program with us.
No, thank you so much. Thanks for asking such great questions. And it was just a treat to be able to talk about Alfie and his adventures.
Nigel Williams, author of the series of books called The Adventures of Alfie, Age 13. You can visit our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0842, and you'll find the link to Nigel's website, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his books directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
I'm sorry and I apologize have the exact same meaning, except when you're at a funeral.
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Here's a brief word about our show and my book. If you become a regular Patreon patron of the Stuff File program, I'll give you an e-version of my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. It's easy to do. Just go to patreon.com and become a patron to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. So, join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. Sign up at patreon.com/the Stuff File program.
Latitude 47 degrees 14 minutes north. Longitude 84 degrees 39 minutes west. Location Montreal, Canada. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's time to crack a spine. The Stuff File presents Book Banter with Stuart Nulman. Once again, here's Peter Anthony Holder.
And here he is once again doing a little nocturnal strolling. It's Stuart Nulman. Hello, Stu.
Hello, Peter. Yeah, I love a good mystery, and I hope you do too.
I do. Absolutely.
Okay, just checking, because on this edition of Book Banter, we're going to do a mystery. Now, along with the British and the Americans, the Swedish have built quite a reputation in the genre of crime and mystery novels that have become international bestsellers. For example, there are the Martin Beck detective novels by the husband and wife duo of Per Walu and Madge Sowal, which includes The Laughing Policeman, which became a movie in 1973 with Walter Matthau and Bruce Dern, and of course, the Millennium Trilogy by the late Stieg Larsson, remember the girl with the dragon tattoo? Now you can add Lars Kepler to that list. Actually, Lars Kepler is the pen name of the husband and wife team of Alexander and Alexandra Andorell, whose crime thrillers featuring Swedish police detective Juna Linna have produced 9 books that have sold over 17 million copies around the world in 40 languages.
So which one is Lars and which one is Kepler?
Well, I would say that that's a good question, but I would say that maybe Alexander is the Lars part and Alexandra is the Kepler part.
Okay. Or vice versa.
But if there's a dispute, they could easily contact me and we'll solve this problem. But until then, I want to tell you that the massive popularity of the books have also led to the development of an upcoming series on Apple TV with Liev Schreiber in the lead role of Juna Linna. Now, their 10th thriller featuring this detective, called The Sleepwalker, was the top-selling fiction title in their native Sweden when it was released there last year, and now that it's available in English for the first time, this novel is one of the reasons why Kepler's books are such an international sensation with mystery buffs. The story takes place at a closed campsite. Well, it starts at a closed campsite just outside of Stockholm, where police are summoned to the campsite in the middle of the night due to an alleged burglary at one of the caravans, or cabins. Now, what they discovered was a grisly, horrific scene. Practically the entire interior of the caravan is covered in blood due to the gruesome axe murder of an individual whose body is horribly dismembered. Through the search by the police, they also discovered another gruesome yet strange scene. A 17-year-old boy named Hugo Sand, who was found asleep on the floor, but with a severed arm that served as his pillow. So, Hugo is promptly arrested by the police on the scene. And
Whoa, back up a second.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's not his severed arm.
No, it's of the poor unfortunate victim.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, now why would he want to cut off his own arm for the sake of a pillow?
No, but wait a minute. I'm assuming that this particular person, or maybe I'm wrong, is not the axe-wielding person, or is he?
Well, the thing is, Hugo is arrested and taken into custody, but there's one thing that's a little curious yet bizarre about Hugo. that sort of complicates the investigation.
Wait, what? More bizarre than sleeping on a limb?
Well, maybe. It depends on how you define bizarre.
Okay.
But Hugo is a chronic sleepwalker with an uncommon form of sleepwalking that is set off by nightmares. As well, he has no memory of the crime ever happening, whether it be as the murderer or as a witness. Now, that's when Stockholm Police Department Detective Juno Linna is called upon to take the case. He realizes the complexities of the sleepwalking murder and Hugo's blank memory of his alleged involvement. So, in order to peel off the layers and unlock the mystery, if Hugo committed the murder or not, Juno enlists the help of Eric Marie Bark, a longtime friend and expert hypnotist, to get inside Hugo's mind to see if he is the murderer in question. Now, there are many sessions, some work out, some go nowhere, but as Juna and Eric continue to extract the truth from Hugo through hypnosis, and the denouement that is starting to become much clearer towards the solution, a snowstorm, a storm front from Russia, of all places, will strike the eastern coast of Sweden, which will whip things around quite literally with everyone involved in the case, which also includes a revelatory twist that will make a stormy situation even stormier. So when it all comes down to it, The Sleepwalker I found was a gripping, harrowing psychological crime thriller. It's filled with suspense, horror, thorough detective work, plot twists, and criminology methods that meticulously examines the mind of a potential criminal and how one's traumatic past can motivate them to commit such violent acts towards other people. And Juno Linna, our hero and protagonist, is a detective who is resourceful, gritty, and highly determined to solve whatever case he is presented with, no matter how gory it is, and those characteristics are prevalent throughout the book. And the brutal snowstorm that makes up the final part of the novel is a breathtaking segment that is a desperate race against time and the elements to prevent an ultraviolet killer from killing again. So Lars Kepler and Juno Linna successfully continue Sweden's tradition of producing highly readable crime mystery thrillers, and The Sleepwalker is vivid proof of that. But I must warn you, watch how you're sleeping.
Well, I was about to ask, do you want to spend time hanging out with a couple who uses dismembered limbs as throw pillows?
Well, that's a good question, Peter. Throw pillows. Oh, I thought maybe a down, like a duvet, maybe, but pillows. I don't know, but you may think it's bizarre, but once you read on, you'll see why. What motivates this killer, and it may be Hugo. It may not be. I'm not going to say.
Okay. And again, the book is?
It's called The Sleepwalker by Lars Kepler. It's published by McClellan and Stuart, and it's $26 in trade paperback.
And dare I say, do you want to go out on a limb and perhaps pick other books within this genre?
Well, I have a skin-tight alibi, Peter, so I have no worries. But I'm going to recommend to you the two series that I mentioned just earlier: the Martin Beck mysteries by Per Walu and Madge Sowell, and the multi-best-selling international Millennium Trilogy by the late Stieg Larsson. And I will tell you something. When I first heard about the first book in Stieg Larsson's trilogy, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I thought it was a hard-boiled detective novel, like in the vein of Mickey Spillane. Boy, was I surprised when I read it.
So again, this week's book is?
The Sleepwalker by the husband and wife team of Lars Kepler, their nom de plume. And it's published by McClellan Stewart, and it's $26.
And how can one reach you, sir?
Well, you won't find me in the wilds of Sweden in the middle of a massive snowstorm. No, I'm going to be somewhere safer in the pages of the Montreal Times. That's mtltimes.ca, or in my blog, which is just as even safer, at stuartnulmansgrapevine.wordpress.com.
And I suppose while you're reading Sleepwalking, or Sleepwalker rather, that you're eating finger food.
Well, I got a leg up on that one, Peter, so what can I say?
Okay. Thank you very much, Stu.
Oh, you're welcome, Peter.
Stuart. Nulman with another edition of Book Banter here on the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
The Stuff File.
And we're just about a racetrack for this edition of the Stuff File program. I do have one more Stuff File news story, and of course, there is an Idiot of the Day coming your way a little later on. Portland, Oregon activists are organizing an emergency world naked bike ride to protest the Trump administration's deployment of 200 federalized National Guard troops to the city. Event organizers announced the demonstration on Instagram. The protest uses naked bicycling as a form of demonstration similar to the annual Portland event originally created to protest big oil. An offshoot group from the original World Naked Bike Ride is coordinating the upcoming event. At press time, specific details about timing and location have not yet been announced. You know, my only concern is that in Portland, it rains a lot. Have you ever slipped off of wet pedals? Now, picture slipping off wet pedals on a man's bike while naked. Yeah, that'll set you free. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
56-year-old Russell Leosa pleaded guilty to grand larceny last week after stealing a tow truck while operators tried to repossess his 2020 Chevrolet Silverado in Brooklyn last year in September. Video footage captured Leosa shoving tow truck driver Paul Corsello and yelling, "Get the bleep out of here!" and "Put the truck down! I'm warning you!" And then another bleep talking about his dear, sweet mother, before forcing his way into the vehicle. The Long Island elevator inspection firm owner, who clearly has his ups and downs, drove the wrong way down 53rd Street with his Silverado hanging from the tow truck's arm, scraping parked cars before the pickup fell off, rolled, and struck two more vehicles near a city bus. Leosa abandoned the stolen tow truck blocks away and was arrested days later as viral videos spread online. His plea deal avoids prison time, calling for 3 years probation, fines, and anger management courses. Yeah, you figure? Now, why? Oh, why? Do you think you can loudly commandeer the tow truck, towing your Silverado, smashing into parked vehicles in broad daylight Brooklyn, with everybody having a smartphone to take videos, and get away with it? One reason, and one reason only: you're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0842. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0842. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WNRHLP-FM in Newport Richey, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. I'm your humble announcer, Ben Patrick Johnson. I can please only one person per day. Today is not your day. Tomorrow's not looking good either.